Are you ready to risk it all for change? That's the question facing Nigerian youth as protests loom. With the government issuing warnings and offering last-minute incentives, the choice isn't easy. Let's explore what's at stake. Nigeria is in a state of tension right now. The country is dealing with some serious problems. Inflation is at 34%, which means things are getting more expensive every day.
Why yellow baby 1,000?
Did I even sell at 1.5?
Oh, get them over.
Many people are struggling with poverty, hunger, and unemployment. It's a tough situation for a lot of Nigerians. Because of these issues, big protests are planned to start on August 1st. People want to speak up about bad governance and demand change. But here's the big question. Will Nigerians risk it all to make their voices heard? The government is warning about possible dangers, but many feel they have no choice. It's a difficult decision that could shape Nigeria's future. But wait, there's more to this story. The government isn't just issuing warnings. They're pulling out all the stops to prevent these protests from happening. President Bola Tinubu and his team are trying a mix of sweet deals and strict rules to keep people off the streets. But will it work? Let's take a look at what the government is offering. After nearly 10 years of no new jobs, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company suddenly has openings. This news was so big that when they announced it, their website crashed from all the people trying to apply. It's like when a popular concert sells out in minutes, but instead of tickets, it's jobs people are after. But that's not all. The government also brought back a youth investment fund. They're planning to give out about $70 million to young entrepreneurs. That's a lot of money that could help many young Nigerians start businesses or grow the ones they already have. Now, you might be thinking, that sounds pretty good. What's the catch? Well, here's where the strict rules come in. If you want to organize a protest, get ready for a lot of paperwork. The government now requires protest organizers to register with the police. And we're not talking about just filling out a simple form. Organizers have to give details about who's leading the protest, where they plan to go, where they'll meet up, how long the protest will last, and how they'll stop any violence from happening. It's like planning a big event, but with a lot more rules and potential consequences. Some people say this is the government's way of wearing out protesters before they even hit the streets. It's like making you run a marathon before you can join a race. The idea is that by the time you've done all this work, you might be too tired to protest. But here's the thing. Many Nigerians aren't happy with these tactics. They're saying the government should focus on fixing the real problems that are making people want to protest in the first place. It's like treating the symptoms instead of the disease. So will these job offers and investment funds be enough to keep people home? Or will the strict rules just make people more determined to protest? It's hard to say. What we do know is that the Nigerian government is trying everything they can to avoid large-scale protests. But in the end, it's up to the Nigerian people to decide if these offers are enough to address their concerns. But this isn't the first time Nigerians have faced this choice. Remember the EndSARS protests in 2020? Those events still cast a long shadow over Nigeria today. Let's take a closer look at how the past is shaping the present. The EndSARS protests were a big moment for Nigeria. People came together to speak out against police brutality and bad governance. But things took a dark turn. The government's response was harsh and violent. Military and police officers fired on unarmed protesters. At least 12 people lost their lives. It was a shocking and traumatic event for many Nigerians. Now, as new protests loom, those memories are fresh in people's minds. The fear and trauma from 2020 are still very real. Many Nigerians are asking themselves, will history repeat itself? Will speaking up put their lives at risk? The government seems to be playing on these fears. They're warning about all the things that could go wrong if people protest. They're talking about violence, chaos, and the threat of police brutality. It's like they're saying, remember what happened last time? Do you really want to risk that again? But here's the thing. Many Nigerians feel like they don't have a choice. The problems that led to the EndSARS protests haven't gone away. In fact, for many, things have gotten worse. So while the memory of 2020 is scary, the reality of everyday life is pushing people to consider protesting again. The government's warnings aren't helping calm things down. In fact, they might be making people more determined to protest. When the Department of State Services says the protests are meant to undermine the government, it makes people angry. When the military warns about anarchy, it makes people wonder if the government is planning to use force again. There's another important point to remember. The Economic Community of West Africa Court made a big decision about the EndSARS protests. They said the Nigerian government violated protesters' rights. The court said the government should protect peaceful protests, not try to stop them. So now Nigerians are stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one side, there's the memory of what happened in 2020. On the other, there's the daily struggle of living in a country with so many problems. The government is using the past to scare people. But for many Nigerians, the present is scary enough to make them want to protest anyway. As August 1st gets closer, the tension is building. Will the echoes of EndSARS keep people at home? Or will the current situation push them to the streets despite the risks? It's a tough choice, and one that every Nigerian will have to make for themselves. As the clock ticks closer to August 1st, Nigeria finds itself at a crossroads. The country is split between those ready to take to the streets and those hesitating to join the protests. This divide runs deep, touching every part of Nigerian society. Let's take a closer look at why some Nigerians are eager to protest, while others are holding back. On one side, we have Nigerians who are fed up with the current situation. They're tired of struggling with a 34% inflation rate, which makes everyday life a constant battle. Many are facing poverty, hunger, and unemployment. These problems aren't new, but they've gotten worse over time. For these Nigerians, protesting isn't just about making noise, it's about fighting for a better future. The desire for change is strong. Many believe that speaking up is the only way to push for better governance. They want leaders who will tackle corruption and actually solve problems, not just make promises. These Nigerians see the protests as a chance to make their voices heard and demand real change. But not everyone is ready to join the protests. There's another side to this story. Many Nigerians are worried about what might happen if they take to the streets. The memory of past protests, especially the EndSARS movement, is still fresh in their minds. They remember the violence, the chaos, and sadly the lives lost. These memories make some people think twice about joining new protests. The government's warnings about possible violence and police brutality are also having an effect. Some Nigerians wonder if it's worth risking their safety to protest. They're asking themselves, what if things get out of control? What if I get hurt? Religious and community leaders are also playing a role in this divide. Some are calling for patience, asking people to give the government more time to address their concerns. They're worried that protests might lead to more problems instead of solutions. This message is making some Nigerians hesitate about joining the protests. For young Nigerians, this situation creates a tough dilemma. On one hand, they're facing serious challenges in their daily lives. They want better job opportunities, affordable food, and a chance at a good future. Protesting seems like a way to push for these changes. On the other hand, they're scared of the risks. They don't want to put themselves in danger, but they also don't want to stay silent while things get worse. This split in opinion is creating tension across Nigeria. In homes, workplaces, and online, people are debating what to do. Some argue that change won't come unless people stand up and demand it. Others say that there might be better ways to solve problems without risking violence. As August 1st gets closer, Nigerians are facing a big decision. Will they join the protests and push for change despite the risks, or will they stay home, hoping for change through other means? It's a choice that could shape Nigeria's future, and it's one that every Nigerian will have to make for themselves. As Nigerians grapple with this tough decision, the world is watching. Nigeria's struggle isn't just a local issue anymore. It's now in the global spotlight, and what happens next could change how other countries see Nigeria. Let's talk about how these protests are being seen around the world. Many people in other countries are paying attention to what's happening in Nigeria. They're seeing the news about the planned protests and the government's warnings. Some are worried about what might happen if things get out of control. The way Nigeria handles these protests could have a big impact on how other countries view it. If the government responds peacefully and listens to the protesters, it could improve Nigeria's image. But if things turn violent like they did during the EndSARS protests, it could hurt Nigeria's reputation. Remember what happened in 2020? The violent response to the EndSARS protests shocked people around the world. Many countries spoke out against the violence. If something like that happens again, Nigeria might face more than just words of disapproval. Other countries might decide to put pressure on Nigeria's government to change how it deals with protesters. Social media is playing a big role in all of this. Protesters are using platforms like Twitter and Facebook to organize and share their message. This means people all over the world can see what's happening in Nigeria in real time. It's like having a window into the country that anyone can look through. This online activity is making the protesters' voices louder. Their messages can reach people far beyond Nigeria's borders. It's harder for the government to control what information gets out. This could put more pressure on them to respond carefully to the protests. But social media isn't just helping the protesters. It's also a tool for spreading false information. Some worry that fake news could make the situation worse. It's important for people to be careful about what they share online. So what might other countries do if things get bad in Nigeria? Some might offer to help mediate between the government and protesters. Others might put pressure on Nigeria's leaders to respect human rights. In extreme cases, some countries might even consider sanctions. But it's not all negative. This attention also gives Nigeria a chance to show the world how it's dealing with challenges. If the government and protesters can find a peaceful way forward, it could set a positive example for other countries. As August 1st gets closer, the whole world is watching Nigeria. What happens in the coming days could have a big impact on Nigeria's place on the global stage. Will Nigeria use this moment to improve its image, or will it face international criticism? The choice is in the hands of Nigeria's leaders and its people. As Nigeria stands at this critical crossroads, the whole country is holding its breath. What happens next could change everything. Let's take a final look at what's at stake and what might happen after August 1st. The issues pushing Nigerians to protest are serious. High inflation, poverty, and unemployment are making life hard for many people. The government has tried to stop the protests with job offers and warnings, but will it be enough? If the protests go ahead, there are different ways things could turn out. They might lead to positive changes if the government listens to the people's concerns. But there's also a risk of violence if things get out of control. Whatever happens, it's clear that Nigeria needs to address the root causes of these problems. Quick fixes won't be enough. The country needs long-term solutions to improve people's lives. So, what's next for Nigeria? Will these protests be a turning point for better or worse? The answer lies in the hands of both the government and the people.